Hello, my name is Steven Sievert, and I'm going to be defending a project plan for a project that I've been working on over the last several weeks. This project is to bring a medical device or wellness device, depending on how it ends up being classified, to market. This device has the name Skliros, and it has been commissioned by a company, Skliros. So this is the project plan to be able to properly classify this device, get its market approval, and market it into retailers, with the intent that it would not have to go through a 510K or a PMA, but would be able to be marketed as a wellness device without any other FDA approval to market. So as an executive summary, in accordance with all FDA regulations, manufacture and market a new over-the-counter nighttime erectile blood flow monitoring device. In the scope, the Skliros team will bring the Skliros OTC blood monitoring product to the U.S. market with all necessary FDA approvals by January 1st, 2023 by building a QMS, that's a quality management system that adheres to 21 CFR 820, securing overseas FDA registered contract manufacturers, completing design and development activities in conjunction with the contract manufacturers, attaining pre-market authorization, and distributing the product through the U.S. Skliros distribution network within the stated budget of $24 million US. So we're looking at the cost benefits of doing this. We did do an ROI on this project and had estimated that we would be able to bring in an annual revenue from sales of $144 million. And the annual inventory for what we would have to do to be able to support that revenue, that amount of sales, was only $72 million. So once you start looking at the other expenses associated with, we had annual U.S. distribution operation costs of $48 million, annual U.S. headquarters costs of $1 million, annual FDA registration fees of $10,000, and so your annual expenses here are $121 million, just over $121 million. So we're looking at a net return of almost $23 million. So there's a very significant ROI here. The payback period, it takes less than 1 year to be able to pay for this investment. So obviously this is a massive opportunity for Skliros to be able to secure their future, their profitability, with the estimated revenue and net returns. So in order to do this, there are some key milestones. This hasn't really changed since the beginning of the project plan. The first milestone was to the QMS. We have to develop a quality management system that adheres to the FDA regulation 21 CFR 820. That is required to be able to market any medical device in the United States, whether that's classified as a medical device or a wellness device or any kind of pathway that is taken for the FDA approval. You will have to have a quality management system. The pathway, so again, we would be looking at what this FDA pathway would be, how we're going to be able to market the device, whether that is through a general wellness device or having it classified as a medical device that would probably then require a 510K or a pre-market authorization, a PMA. The development, so it has to go through its design and development cycle to be able to develop the device that's going to be used. Supplier development. This is going to be completely manufactured using contract manufacturers. They have to have their FDA registration as well to be able to manufacture the device. We will not be doing Skliros or the isometric team that is supporting this project would not be doing any of the actual manufacturing. The prototype, so again, there's got to be a prototype that is built, verified, validated, has to be able to be proven to do what it needs to do, go through any necessary clinical trials or anything that you would need to submit testing data to the FDA. Of course, the validation of the prototype, like we mentioned, it has to go through a certain battery of tests to be able to be properly approved by the FDA and marketed. The technical files, DHF, which is a design history file, DMR, which is a device master record, any other technical files would need to be completed. This would be a major milestone in the project to have all of the technical documentation shored away. Market clearance obviously being a very big part of this, tied to the pathway, whether that was through the pre-market 510K or the PMA, we do have to get market clearance before we can market the device. inventory. So this was a major milestone to be able to actually purchase volumes from the contract manufacturer once they've established their capability, their manufacturing process and their capability to be able to produce production volumes. We have to be able to secure inventory and store them in our distribution centers. And a lot of work has to go into improving our distribution centers to even accommodate this product. It's going to be a very large product line for Skliros, and the current distribution centers do not have the space there to accommodate that, so it has to be incorporated into this project to be able to upgrade the current distribution centers to be able to accommodate the inventory that we would need. And then, of course, in order to really finalize and close out this project, we have to be able to accommodate the initial sales. So once we have our market clearance and we've built our inventory, we have to actually get orders from retailers and be able to fulfill those orders from our distribution centers. So here I'm looking at the work breakdown structure. There a lot of work went into this. There were some comments on the original work breakdown structure that too many of the activities and the tasks and subtasks were associated, up here at too high a level. So I have gone through and completely rebuilt the work breakdown structure so that we've got our project phases up here at the top. There are 5 primary project phases. You won't be able to see them here from this overall view of the work breakdown structure, but I'll be able to cover them more in depth in the upcoming slides. But the phases then are only connected to the activities associated with that phase at this point in my work breakdown structure, and then from each activity it's broke down into tasks. And then in some of the more complex phases, such as the distribution network, it's not only the tasks, but broke down into subtasks as well. And where I have the subtasks, they're only connected to the tasks they're associated with, and those tasks are associated with the activity, and then the activity back to the phase. So it's I did a lot of work in Visio to improve the work breakdown structure and try to make sure that all of the relationships between phases, activities, tasks, and subtasks were very clearly identified. So also looking at just from the Word document that I created for the project plan, it's a little easier than to see, so we're not looking at that entire exploded view of the entire work breakdown structure. Here are the primary phases. There are 5 of them. The first being to develop, of course, the quality management system that is compliant to 21 CFR 820. That's the QSR, the quality system regulation. And then the second phase being the product design and development. The third is the process design and development. So we have to be able to have a manufacturer that has a design and develop process to be able to manufacture the volumes that we would need to procure and retail. The fourth phase being any FDA clearance and marketing. And the fifth, the actual development of the distribution network necessary to be able to actually sell the device to the retailers. And then, of course, looking at where I've developed the critical path, and in this there are some things that can start. Some of the phases can start at the same time. The development of the QMS and the design and development of the device can start at the same time. But of course, based on the relationships and things like that, you're able to then get to what the critical path is. And where we've got the most time is getting any kind of FDA clearance to be able to market this device. So this becomes the critical path where there really is no slack in order for us to be able to have devices in our distribution centers in time to meet our deadline that is defined in the scope as being January 1st, 2023. We really have to focus on making sure that we don't lose any time in any of the FDA clearance portion of the project. So then looking at the activities, again, you can see these activities a lot more clearly here in this table, as well as the sequence in which they are completed than you can in the slide where I have the work breakdown structure. You can see where they're associated with the phase. And again, we have the phases, then associated with the activities, then associated with the tasks, then associated with the subtasks. I can't go into all of those into detail or read them all for you. There are too many, especially when we get into the tasks and the subtasks. But essentially, all of the activities here that are necessary to support these phases are broke down. For getting the QMS together, we have to secure the resources for the quality management system, develop the quality management system, evaluate that system for compliance, For the design and development of the device, we have to create a design and development plan, a prototype, we have to conduct design reviews, we have to finalize the device DMR. When it comes to developing the manufacturing process, the third phase of this, we have to secure contract manufacturers, create a design and development plan for the manufacturing process, develop that manufacturing process, conduct the design reviews, and finalize the process DMR. So these are other parts of the device master record associated with maybe any of the work instructions or anything else that would go along with what it takes to properly execute that manufacturing process. The fourth phase, determining the market, or getting through the FDA market pathway, the activities associated with that being determining that market pathway, and if necessary, preparing the 510K or the PMA, whatever is going to be needed to get that FDA clearance to get this product to market. The fifth phase, of course, is the development of the distribution network. As we mentioned, there's some construction work that's going to have to happen to be able to accommodate that volume, I think, as I mentioned early in the video. And so on that, you can see then that activity clearly broke out here: expand existing distribution centers with new bays and shelving, stock the distribution centers for the initial orders, and fulfill those initial orders to the retailers. So here you can see all of the activities that are necessary to be able to complete all of those project phases to be able to bring this project successfully to completion. Then I also have it broken into tasks. Again, this is where I can't go into this level of detail and be able to describe all of the tasks, but I do replicate the work breakdown structure in my table, showing all of the tasks and where it's applicable, what the subtasks are, and what their relationship is from phase to activity to task to subtask, as well as the sequence in which they would be completed. So when you're looking, for instance, up here, develop the contract deliverables for the quality management system, that's sequence number one. It's the first task to be completed against that activity of developing that quality management system, and the second in that is to hire the consultant to build the quality management system. So everything is outlined as far as the sequence in which it needs to be able to be completed, that task or that subtask needs to be able to be completed to be able to successfully achieve the activity that is necessary for that phase. I have a very detailed risk register. This really hasn't changed since it was first put together. I think that we did a really good job of identifying all of the risks associated with each phase and each activity, and we really did this very similar to how you would do portions of an FMEA. If anyone is familiar with FMEA, that's a failure modes, effects, and analysis. And that's where we're looking at all of those necessary activities, identifying any risks that could, really impact anything in that iron triangle or any of the criteria to be able to complete this project, and any of those things that could have had an impact on the scope or the schedule or the budget or the quality of the deliverables. We also then calculated a score similar to how you would an RPN, that's a risk priority number, to be able to give us a threshold of what we would maybe constitute as a high risk item that needed some more attention. And in each one of those, there was mitigation strategy in place. So anything that we really looked at that had significant risk here, we were not going to just accept that risk. There was a mitigation strategy in place for all of them. In most cases we can't eliminate the risk, but the actions that we took to mitigate would be very effective to be able to make sure that we had good protocols and things in place to reduce the likelihood of that occurring or the impact that it might have to the overall budget or schedule or scope or the quality, any of those, the impact that it might have overall to the project. So the risk register is very thorough in the project plan. Very large document. It has the entire risk register in there that can be reviewed, but I believe that we have done a really good job of identifying risks and mitigating. When it comes to resources, this is something that has changed very little as far as being able to assign the resources to each task. So you've already seen the tables of all the tasks. We've got a team that we built to be able to accommodate that. It includes quality engineers such as Mr. Westuba here. It has a procurement, Eva Green is our procurement specialist that is doing a lot of our hiring and bringing on the suppliers and construction crews and things like that. Deng Farrick here is our quality consultant, our QA/RA consultant, helping us with regulatory matters building our quality management system, things like that. We've got a couple of key engineers on the team, Satine over here, as well as Mr. Anthony Stark are a couple of our key engineers on the team, and they have been appropriately assigned to their respective aspects, such as Satine is primarily working on the design and development side of our device, as to where Anthony is supporting on really developing our contract manufacturer and their manufacturing process to make sure that it meets, that is able to create a product that meets all of our specifications. So they work very closely together, but they also, in order for us not to strain our resources, we made sure that we had 2 key engineers on board to be able to simultaneously work on their respective area of the project to make sure that it meets its deliverables. Now, one thing that I can say on the resources that has changed a bit as I went through the project planning is that I realized that I had also restrained myself a bit too much. So myself, Steven Sievert, I am of course the project manager here on this project, but I had also assigned myself in the last phase, the development of the distribution network. I had really put too much strain on myself to complete those tasks. I kind of realized as I continued to go through this planning process that I was going to be too restricted if I was trying to handle the tactical elements of this last phase of the project, while also trying to keep everything organized from a high-level project management standpoint. So I kind of realized that I did need to separate myself from that, and that I needed to be able to effectively take a high-level view and monitor the entire project, and to have the proper resources in place to complete the things necessary according to the guidance that I was giving, but I couldn't be the one doing them. So I did bring in some additional support, Mr. Kenneth Allen here, to be able to help with a lot of this construction effort with the distribution networks, so that I was not having to manage the day-to-day activity. Instead, he was being given those tasks and those construction efforts, and then according to the guidance that I was giving through the project plan, and then of course reporting that back up so that we could make sure that we were measuring that against what was intended and making sure that it was being completed on time. But I felt that this was a really important aspect to add into the project plan, because if we didn't take this action and bring on this additional support, then I may have found myself with risks realized in regard to not being able to complete the construction deliverables at the distribution centers while I was trying to maybe handle other aspects of the project. So there is also an overall budget for this project. This is very difficult to see, but it does include the amount of time and money for all of those resources that we saw on the previous slide, for all of the building materials. It's all outlined in a pretty high amount of detail. What I did want to point out though here is that you can see, this is from the bottom of this overall budget, that we did come in, once we put everything together, at just under 19 million. We had originally estimated the project at $21 million to complete. So when we went through this planning, we were able to really, that was close. I was pretty impressed that the initial assessment was as close as it was, the 19 to 21, but it's also worth noting that as we did a very significant breakdown as to what all of the manpower was going to cost and what all of the materials were going to cost and the logistics and everything else involved, that we actually were able to get that 21 million down to 18.8 million. And we have sitting in the bank from our investors 24 million US dollars. So there was a little bit of a buffer there, but that gives us, of course, a little more, which gives us a little more comfort as we actually execute this project. I do have a very detailed Gantt that I built in Microsoft Project to outline the overall schedule. This is just a snapshot. I don't have all of the tasks. I've got it collapsed so that you can only see the phases and the activities, but this in the project plan, it also has included the entire schedule that has that exploded so that you can see all of the tasks and the subtasks as well. But you can see, of course, the bars in here that are showing how long everything is going to take, when its start and dates are. Most of that is in the collapsed view, but it's included in the project schedule. But that being said, so long as and we've got some risk, and it's in the risk register, and we've got some assumptions that we've made, and we'll go into detail about that as we continue going through this presentation. But so long as we do not have to do a PMA or a 510K, so long as we can get this approved by the FDA to go to market as a general wellness device, we will be well within the time frame that we need for this project. The intent from Skliros is to make sure that we have everything to market by January 1st, 2023. And if we can get everything done on the regulatory side without having to get PMA or 510K, we will come in somewhere like late November. If I remember correctly, it will be late in 2022, but we will make it before the end of the year and before the January 1st deadline. Now, if we do have to do a PMA, we will absolutely blow that schedule. We will not make it. If we have to do a 510K, we're going to have to pull out all of the stops to get there. So there is significant risk if we are not able to market this as a general wellness device. If we do have to classify it as a medical device, then this is where, and this is why it shows also that that's the critical path where we have no slack. If we end up in this regulatory situation where we have to get a certain pre-market notification or pre-market approval, then we are really going to constrain the schedule. So that's one of the most important things to note. That's why it's read as critical path. We absolutely have to, if we're going to meet all of those aspects of the iron triangle, we have to be able to market this as a general wellness device. Looking at the dependencies then in that work breakdown structure and in the overall schedule, I wanted to highlight a few things there. I've got everything outlined here, all of the activities and things and what they depend on and what the dependency type is. They're all defined. There's much more than that, than what you can see on the screen in the document for the overall project plan. But some of these that I wanted to highlight, because most of these are a finish to start. The first couple actually have no dependency. If you remember from looking at the network diagram, that I'm actually able to start two of the phases at the same time. That is developing the quality management system and also the design and development of the device itself. So those are showing as NA. They don't depend on anything else. They have no dependency type. They kick off the project, and they both can start in parallel. Everything else in the project, aside from those two that we can initiate right from the get-go, does have some sort of dependency. Almost all of them are a finish to start, which makes sense. I just have an example up here of the consultant conducts a gap analysis on the quality management system. This does depend on us hiring the consultant to build the quality management system. So naturally, this consultant cannot perform a gap analysis on the QMS unless he has first been hired and has built the QMS. So I think that makes a lot of logical sense, and that's why this is a finish to start. But I do have some other dependency types in my plan as well, such as when I'm going through the design and development of the device, I've got validation activity, which depends on the verification activity. Verification activity should come first. However, I have this one in particular listed as a start to start, because when it comes to the actual device, and I do not have it this way in the process verification and validation, only in the device verification and validation. And that's because I can start validating that the device that I have manufactured works as intended before I have truly verified that all of its outputs met its input requirements. I can be doing those things in parallel. So I do have that one as a start to start. I have to be able to have my verification activity started to start my validation activity as well. I had to have produced a device and made sure that it had met some input requirements, but I do not have to have everything verified before I start my validation. I can start validating as I'm verifying, so it's a start to start. And then similarly, create DHF documentation. That's the design, the design history file. It is contingent on the validation activity. It depends on the validation activity, but only to have that finished. So you have to have validation activity finished in order to finish the DHF documentation. But the DHF documentation includes a lot, not just validation, but it also includes several other things, right? So you can start the DHF, but you cannot finish it until validation activity is finished, because it is part of the DHF. So I do have a handful of examples throughout the project plan that are a finish to finish. But by and large, it is a finish to start, like our first example. There are a lot of dependencies that really require for one thing to end before the next can begin. Each one of those is clearly defined through my project schedule, the Gantt that I created in Microsoft Project, as well as in the table that is in my document, my overall project plan that has been submitted. The communication matrix that I put together, this one did have some comments initially because I had all of my types of meetings and things bullet pointed in my communication matrix. This really was just to kind of have an overview. I've taken that out to reduce any kind of confusion there. It no longer has an overview to describe what happens. It is simply a matrix of what is being communicated and who is being communicated with. You can see in here, there's one more that I couldn't get on the slide, but the matrix is a single page in my document. But I do have my risk management documentation, issue management documentation, change control, and also there's a schedule that's down there below there. But it also shows who's going to receive those things. So, you know, these that are down at a low level are really kind of the core team members, the people that are working, all of those resources that you saw, the engineers, the quality engineers, the consultants, all of those guys that are working on the project are really kind of working on some of these things. When it comes to like the issue management, for instance, this is, you know, it's something that is evolving throughout the project. We have issues that are coming up every day, and some of them are pretty small, but they have to be documented so that we can utilize them for lessons learned later after the project's completed. But they don't really need to go up very far, right? So this can stay really within the core team, but minutes are distributed. There's a Scrum meeting at the end of every day. That's where this communication happens, and then, like I said, there are minutes that are distributed out to the core team from those issues, so that just the core team kind of understands what's happening every single day, what's the status of those items that we're working on, you know, what do we really kind of need to know, what's an issue that's coming up that needs to be resolved. That really stays at the core team level. And it's handled through a Scrum every day. So people are getting together physically and just discussing, hey, what's going on, and distributing the minutes. But as you come up higher, then you start involving some of the higher levels. We do have the CEO now included in this risk management document. That risk management document is sent out once a week. There is a weekly Teams meeting where the team is discussing, but the document from this is distributed as minutes after that Teams meeting, and it is distributed to the CEO of Skliros, Cyrus T. Virus. And there also is an executive status report. So this is the highest level, and this also happens once a week. It has several inputs in it, but this is where myself, the project manager, is reporting up to the Skliros CEO, Cyrus T. Virus. And it does not have the core team members. It's a much higher level meeting. It's a Teams call as well, and it happens once a week, and that is between myself and my client to be able to discuss all of those inputs. So you can kind of see there are different levels of communication that are happening for different reasons, and they're happening in different ways. These high level things are happening primarily you know, once a week with Teams meetings. Depending on what it is, it might have only the CEO, but maybe the CEO and the core team members. But then when it comes to like issues and things like that, it's really being handled through those Scrums with meetings just being distributed every day to the core team members so that they can quickly resolve those issues. There are some assumptions, as I mentioned, that were really important to note for this project. One is that the scope of the project would not change. The second, that Skliros will be able to get approval to market the device as an OTC general wellness device without needing a 510K or a PMA. So initially my assumption was that we would get it to market regardless of needing 510K or PMA. But as we continued to plan, we really saw that it was very critical for us to be able to get it to market as a general wellness device, but also we really believe that we can. We think that there is no reason that we will not be able to get this to market without it, you know, with it just based on guidance that has already been reviewed. We truly believe that we can get this to market as a general wellness device, and we are assuming that we will be able to. The project team will be able to complete a manufacturable design, so of course everything is contingent on that, and we do believe that we will be able to achieve that. It's an assumption that we can come up with a design that will be able to be manufactured. The QA/RA consultant will be able to build a QMS that adheres to 21 CFR 820, so of course again that is an assumption that has to happen. There will be no major changes in FDA regulation that would impact the project plan during its duration. So this is a pretty safe assumption. The QSR has not changed since the mid-90s when it was first first released. But this is only a safe assumption, and this is interesting because this happened during the project planning, but this is only a safe assumption if we truly meet our project timeline, as there was proposed ruling within the last week, just over a week, that this QSR would change, that it is going to be harmonized with ISO 13485. That's the International Standard for Quality Management System requirements for medical devices, and that may happen, but probably outside of the time frame that it's going to take for us to complete this project, because even if it is instituted, it has to go through a period of 90 days of public comment, and then there's a number of years that the FDA would allow for manufacturers to then adhere to the new requirements for quality management systems for medical devices. So we will be able to, it is a safe assumption, we will be able to complete this project without any major regulation changes that would impact it. However, anything launched after this, that may not be true. Some of the constraints: the project must be completed by 1/1/23. I've already talked about that is a major constraint. If the project does need a 510K or a PMA, we will most likely exceed. If it's a PMA, it's not even a most likely, it's a definite, but we would exceed the schedule. We will not make 1/1/23. If we can get it to market based on that assumption that it's going to be a general wellness device, we'll be okay. Project must be completed under $24 million US. That's the budget. That's not what's actually budgeted based on the estimates, but that's what we have as far as exhausting all of our efforts with gaining capital for this project with investors. We have $24 million in the bank to be able to do it, and that's all we have. We've pretty well squeezed everything that we can out of investors. $24 million is what we have, so that's a constraint for the project. Now, the average cost for similar devices approved through the 510K process is about $17.3 million, so we also believe we're going to be okay. But if there are any kind of major problems during construction or during the FDA clearance for the device, then we may have to consider, where there may be some issues where there would be a constraint, but we believe we'll be okay. Manpower, we only have the manpower that we have listed, and this could be a challenge, of course, if there's flight risk or COVID or any other number of things that would impact our manpower. So it's something we have to consider on our side from our project team, but then also with the contract manufacturer. After we develop the manufacturing process, we have to make sure that we can continue to deliver volumes. We've got long transit times. We have to be able to maintain the stock and inventory to meet our retailer orders. So we have to make sure that we have a close eye on manpower at our contract manufacturer facility as well. Another constraint being the current distribution center cannot handle this additional inventory. As I mentioned, it will require a lot of additional infrastructure and construction to be able to improve the bays for holding the stock and the shelving. So that can become a constraint because we do not currently have the space to do what we need to do. And then the device is going to have very strict quality requirements. It has to be verified and validated. I've already covered that a lot in the video as far as what we're going to have to do to verify and validate both the product and its manufacturing process to be able to get the approval. So it's going to take a long period of time. And also money. So it's very expensive to be able to create a manufacturing process, create a prototype, to get the verification validation activity underway, to get any kind of necessary testing done to be able to meet regulatory requirements, get FDA approval. So obviously these are huge constraints to our time and our money for this project, but we have to meet the quality requirements.